Hello and welcome to Week 8 in Rhetoric 3326. This is Dr. Heidi Harris, and I want to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be working on this week, which is the front and back matter for the final report. So we're going to talk about basically why the front and back matter to your audience. So first of all, what does it mean to talk about the front and back matter of the report? What is it? The front matter includes a few components. The first is the letter of transmittal. That'll actually be submitted separately when we submit the final report. The title page, the table of contents, and the abstract. So all of these, we wrote the body of the report last week. This week we're going to go take pieces from that body of the report to set up a really kind of long introduction to the report itself. The back matter will include the references, which you should have already mostly composed. You'll need to add a few things perhaps that you've researched since you turned in your progress report, and any appendices that you might need to include to add additional matter that will help your audience understand your report in general. So how is it composed? The front matter should follow the 4 principles of readable technical writing. In other words, it should be clear, it should be concise, it should be fluent, and it should be personable. The front matter is perhaps the most vital portion of the report because that might be all that your audience ever reads. If you're writing to a decision maker or someone in a position of power and authority, they might really only get to the first part of your report before making a decision. So it's very vital that you're clear, concise, fluent, and personable in this section. First of all, the letter of transmittal. This will introduce the entire report to the audience. It's in letter format, and there's an example in your textbook of how that should be set up. The irony is that it might never reach your actual audience. It might be submitted to an administrative assistant who might tear your letter of transmittal off and just send the report forward. It might be lost because it's not necessarily a part of the report, but it's still important to introduce that so that you can get the report beyond that first level, maybe that gatekeeper of the administrative assistant, and to your actual audience. The letter of transmittal introduces the report and invites the reader to read it, and it urges the reader to take action. So this is where being personable is very important. You want to make sure that you are addressing the audience in a way that invites them to read the report and sets up the important points in the report itself. The title page will provide a descriptive report title in addition to your name, your position, in other words, a student at UALR, and the date. You're going to not want to be as concise in this section. So in other words, not for my report, BA and MA classes online. That doesn't give the reader enough information to understand whether or not they need to read the report further. A better title is Recommendation Report to Move BA and online MA classes online, but it still leaves out some very vital information. The best is Recommendation Report to Move BA and MA classes online in the Rhetoric and Writing Department at UALR. So you'll want to be as specific as possible both about the topic of the report, and the person or persons who are going to read it, their position or place. Just like we talked about being local and specific for identifying our problem and audience, you'll want to be local and specific for writing your title. The table of contents I'm just going to mention here because we're actually going to work on that more fully in week 9. Until you have your entire report drafted, it's really hard to write your table of contents because page numbers might change as you shift other elements. So we'll talk more about the final table of contents in week 9. For this week's activity, just a placeholder, a full page that says table of contents at the top, so I understand that you know it will go there, will be fine. The abstract is perhaps the most important section of the entire document. You might also see this called an executive summary. This is the place where the reader is going to really get an overview of your report. I've had reports I've worked on for months, and the person who I've written them to only reads the abstract and says yes or no, and then hands it to someone else to actually administer the change if it's accepted. The abstract is going to include 4 components. First of all, the first sentence in your abstract is a statement of purpose. So why are you writing the report? What's the purpose of this report? You should be able to use some of the language from your proposal. If you think back then, there's that little statement up at the top that talks about the purpose. You should be able to pull some of that in and modify it for the statement of purpose in your abstract. It's going to include a summary of the main parts of the report. So for each kind of main section, for example, when you set up the problem, you might do a quick summary of that. When you set up the solution, you might do a quick summary of that. You'll indicate the conclusions you reach in the report, so just a sentence or two that quickly gives an overview of what conclusions you reach based on your research. And then your specific recommendation. This abstract is going to feel a little bit repetitive because you're pulling pieces from other documents or from other parts of the report that you're going to restate again. The purpose is going to be in your introduction, the conclusion is going to be in your conclusion, your recommendation will be in your recommendation. That'll be fine. My rule of thumb is to include one sentence for each main section of your report. So the purpose is basically going to be a sentence from the introduction. Your summary is going to include maybe 2 to 3 sentences based on how many main parts you have in that body. The conclusion is a sentence or two, and your recommendation is a sentence or two. And I'm going to give you an example. So this would be an abstract that I would write for that report I'm working on. As you can see, it's only a paragraph long. It's actually about 4 sentences. The first sentence introduces the purpose. So this report investigates the possibility of moving both the BA in Professional and Technical Writing and the MA in Professional and Technical Writing fully online by the fall 2015 semester. The next part is my summary. So I have 2 sentences because I have 2 main body sections of my report. So my report outlines potential benefits of moving the programs online, including increasing overall enrollments and providing more access to students who are bound by place and time commitments. In addition, several drawbacks are discussed, including the need for additional staffing and faculty hesitation about moving the program online. So in this section, where you're summarizing the main body of your report, you might include a brief overview of the problems as you see them, the problems that you've identified in the report. I should be able to see from this sample abstract sections of your report clearly outlined. So I should be able to see here the same kinds of elements that I see in the body of your report. Next, I have my conclusion. So my conclusion is the report concludes that the MA program can feasibly move fully online in fall 2014, while the BA can feasibly move fully online in fall 2015. So it's a very concise and clear summary of what my conclusion is based on this research that I did. So I should be able to see research here, kind of brief overview, conclusion here, here's what my conclusion states from that research. And then finally, recommendations. So the recommendations are a little more specific than the conclusion. It's going to be my path of implementation, basically. So here I state, my recommendations for moving the programs online include a study of highly enrolled and under-enrolled classes in the program to shift faculty load from low to high enrolled classes, and a recommended 2.0 FTE, which is full-time equivalent, increase in faculty who are qualified to teach online classes. Sorry, let me go back for a second. So there are basically 4 parts of this abstract. That purpose statement, which should be reflected in your introduction of your report. A brief summary of the report itself. If you have more than 2 sections, maybe you have 3 main sections. You might have 3 sentences here. Your conclusion, and your recommendations for implementing your solution. So that covers the front matter. Next, we're going to move to the back matter, and there's really only 2 key pieces of this. The first one is your references, which you should have pretty much drafted out in your progress report. You'll need to make any corrections that I indicated on your progress report before you put that final reference list into your references for your final report. And you'll want to add any additional citations that you found since completing the proposal and progress report. So I know some of you have continued your research. Be sure that you add those in. Also, any citations in your final should be cited in the document itself, and I'll go over that as I go over the body of your report in week 9. Be sure to indicate if you are citing an MLA or APA. Sometimes I can't quite tell which citation style you're using, so just add a quick note in parentheses which you're using, so that'll help me know how well you've used it. Then finally, appendices, and these are going to vary depending on what you're working on, but basically they're going to include any longer materials that support your report. So if you have large tables or additional data, interview or survey questions that you use to gather firsthand information from people, you'll include those in the appendices. And appendices are going to be additional materials that just help your reader understand your research or further implement your recommendations. So if you have a detailed budget for implementing your plan, you might include the budget in this section. Or for example, if you have a list of services or sources that you might be able to use to implement your plan, that list of services or sources might go here. Not necessarily ones you've cited in your document, but let's say if I wanted to include a list of the major organizations that help identify online quality courses, I might include that in appendices for my report. Finally, remember to go back and review Chapter 7, Writing with a Readable Style, as you compose these sections of your report. Because they're so short, it might be easy to just kind of blow them off and throw them together at the last minute. But because they're the parts that your reader might only get to, they're incredibly important to write in a very readable style. So remember to write clearly, and that's covered on pages 104 through 109 of your textbook. That includes things like avoiding ambiguous pronouns that don't really go anywhere, or modifiers, using active voice, and avoiding kind of long constructions, stacked prepositional phrases and nouns that don't really add to your writing. You'll want to write concisely. And this is a major section. You'll see a lot of times in the comments to your writing, I'll reference page 110. There are 4 really important points on page 110 that you want to make sure that you go through and edit for when you're editing the final draft of this. And that includes also eliminating redundant or repetitious phrases in your writing. Writing fluently, so you'll want to be sure to combine sentences so that they're clear and accurate, that you vary the sentence construction, that you're using parallel structure and lists, and other things from page 111 through 114. And finally, write personably. So in other words, you're going to have to adjust your tone to your audience. If your audience is a decision maker, they're going to want to see professional writing, but they're also going to want to be invited into the conversation to read your document, particularly in that letter of transmittal. So review pages 114 through 116 for an overview of writing personably. That is all. Once you compose the front and back matter, I'll give you some feedback on it so that you'll be able to use it to draft, to place into your final draft of your report. We're getting close. It's kind of exciting, so let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to reading your activity for this week.